Celeste Varela never imagined that the two people she trusted most, her husband, Dominic Reyes, and her own mother, Veronica Varela, would be the ones to shatter her world. But as she stood frozen in the dimly lit bedroom doorway, watching them tangled in each other's arms, she realized that betrayal had been living under her roof all along. Celeste Marlowe had always believed her life was close to perfect. She and her husband Dominic had been together for 8 years, building a marriage that many envied. He was charming, successful, and dependable. At least that was what she had always thought. Their home was warm and welcoming, filled with laughter and the familiar comforts of a life well lived. They had no children, but they had dreams, and Celeste trusted Dominic to build a future with her side by side. When her mother, Veronica Langley, moved in with them after her father's passing, Celeste saw it as an opportunity to reconnect. Having her mother around felt like a blessing, a way to keep the family close and to provide support for one another. At first, everything seemed fine. Veronica helped around the house, often cooking meals and sharing late-night conversations with Celeste. Dominic, who had always been courteous and respectful toward his mother-in-law, seemed to enjoy having her around. Celeste took comfort in the way they all coexisted so harmoniously under the same roof. But then, subtle changes began to emerge, ones that Celeste couldn't quite explain. Dominic started working late more often, claiming an increased workload. Celeste understood that his job demanded long hours, but something felt different. His excuses were vague, and sometimes, when she tried to call him, he wouldn't pick up. When he did answer, his tone seemed distant, as though she was interrupting something. Veronica also began acting strangely. She was still affectionate and caring, but there were moments when Celeste noticed something off. There were glances between her mother and Dominic that felt unusual, fleeting moments of silence when she walked into a room, and a tension in the air that she couldn't quite put into words. At times, Celeste found Veronica avoiding her gaze, entirely, as though there was something she didn't want to acknowledge. Small things started to add up. Dominic's cologne would sometimes linger in places he rarely spent time in, like the guest bedroom where Veronica slept. Once, Celeste found one of Dominic's ties tucked away in the laundry basket Veronica used, but she brushed it off, thinking he might have misplaced it. Then there were moments when she would walk past the guest bedroom late at night and hear faint whispers, but by the time she opened the door, the room would be silent. Doubt crept into her mind, but Celeste pushed it away. She loved her husband. She loved her mother. The idea that anything could be wrong between them felt absurd. She convinced herself that she was overthinking, that she was being paranoid over nothing. She told herself that stress was making her see things that weren't really there. Then, one afternoon, while running errands, she received an anonymous message on her phone. It was a simple text with no name, no indication of who had sent it. The words sent a chill through her spine. "Your husband is hiding something. Look closer." Celeste's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the message. Who had sent it, and why? She wanted to believe it was some cruel joke, but deep down, a small voice inside her whispered that she already knew something was wrong. She just hadn't been willing to face it. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made her alert. Every creak in the floorboards made her wonder. Lying beside Dominic, she studied his face, searching for signs of deception. He looked peaceful, oblivious to the storm raging in her mind. But Celeste wasn't at peace. The message had opened a door she couldn't close, and now she had no choice but to step through it. Celeste couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The anonymous message had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, and no matter how much she tried to dismiss it, it kept growing. That evening, she moved through her home with heightened awareness, watching her husband and mother more closely than ever. Every glance, every movement, every small interaction between them felt suspicious. Were they standing too close? Did they exchange a knowing look when they thought she wasn't watching? Were they avoiding her gaze on purpose? Her heart pounded as she tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid. She had no real proof, just a gut feeling and a cryptic message from someone she didn't even know. But something told her that if she ignored it, she would regret it. She decided she had to find out the truth. That night, she waited until Dominic went to bed before quietly getting up and walking through the darkened house. The hallway was silent except for the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet. The guest bedroom door was slightly ajar, and a dim light spilled from within. She hesitated outside, her breath shallow, her hands trembling. A part of her wanted to turn around, to pretend she had never seen the message, to go back to the life she had believed was real. But another part of her, the part that refused to be blind, forced her forward. Slowly, she pushed the door open wider. The sight before her made her stomach drop. Dominic and Veronica were in bed together, wrapped in each other's arms, their bodies entangled in a way that left no room for doubt. The world around Celeste seemed to freeze, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. It didn't feel real. Her husband, the man she had vowed to spend her life with, was betraying her in the most unimaginable way. Her mother, the woman who had given birth to her, the person she was supposed to trust more than anyone, had done the unthinkable. A wave of nausea rose in her throat as her vision blurred with tears. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to wake them up and confront them right then and there. But instead she turned and fled. She didn't want to hear their excuses, didn't want to see the look of shock on their faces when they realized they had been caught. She couldn't bear to stay in that house another second. Celeste ran outside, the cold night air hitting her, skin like a slap. She felt like she was in a nightmare, like she would wake up any second and find that none of this had happened. But no matter how many times she blinked, the truth remained. Her husband and her mother had betrayed her. And now nothing would ever be the same. She paced back and forth, her thoughts racing. What was she supposed to do now? Where could she go? Who could she even talk to about this? Her entire world had just collapsed in an instant. And she had no idea how to pick up the pieces. After what felt like hours, she forced herself to calm down. She needed a plan. She couldn't just run away from this forever. Dominic and Veronica had been lying to her for who knew how long, and now it was her turn to take control. She wouldn't let them destroy her without a fight. As she walked back toward the house, her hands clenched into fists. She was no longer the heartbroken wife or the betrayed daughter. She was something else now, someone who had been wronged beyond repair. And no matter what it took, she would make sure they both paid for what they had done. Celeste spent the rest of the night in a haze, sitting alone in her car parked just down the street. She couldn't bring herself to go back inside, not after what she had seen. The betrayal played over and over in her mind like a relentless nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, Dominic and Veronica, lying together as if what they were doing wasn't the most disgusting, unforgivable act imaginable. The rage inside her burned hotter with each passing second. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something far worse. By the time the sun began to rise, she had made up her mind. She wouldn't confront them immediately. She needed to be smart about this. If they had been able to keep this secret for so long, that meant they were careful. They had hidden their affair under her nose, manipulating her, deceiving her with every smile, every fake conversation. If she rushed in blindly, they would find a way to twist things, to make her doubt herself, to turn the situation in their favor. She refused to let them have that power over her. She wiped her face, took a deep breath, and drove back to the house. When she walked in, everything felt the same. But she knew better. Dominic was already up, standing in the kitchen with his usual cup of coffee, greeting her like it was just another morning. Veronica sat at the dining table, flipping through a magazine as if she hadn't spent the night in bed with her daughter's husband. Celeste clenched her jaw but forced herself to act normal. If they could lie to her so easily, then she could. Lie, too. She moved through the day as if nothing had changed, though inside she was unraveling. Every word they spoke felt like poison. Every interaction between them, no matter how small, felt like an insult to her intelligence. They thought they were getting away with it. They thought she was clueless. That made their betrayal even more unbearable. She started watching them more closely, looking for anything she could use against them. She checked Dominic's phone when he wasn't around, but found nothing. No messages, no calls, no saved photos. He was careful, too careful. Veronica was just as cautious. There were no obvious signs, no clear evidence that would expose them. It was as if they had erased every trace of their affair, knowing that if Celeste ever became suspicious, she wouldn't find proof. But Celeste knew that even the most careful liars made mistakes. One evening, she decided to set a trap. She told Dominic she would be working late and made sure Veronica overheard the conversation. Then, instead of going to work, she parked her car a few blocks away and walked back to the house. She stood outside in the darkness, heart pounding as she waited. Minutes felt like hours, but finally she saw what she had expected. Through the window, she watched as Dominic emerged from their bedroom, glancing around as if to make sure no one was home. A few seconds later, Veronica stepped out of the guest room and into his arms. The way he touched her, the way she leaned into him, it made Celeste's stomach turn. She took out her phone and started recording. The evidence she had been looking for was right in front of her. For a moment, she wanted to barge inside, to scream at them, to let her rage consume everything. But she stopped herself. No, this wasn't the time. She had something far better planned. Celeste wasn't just going to expose them. She was going to destroy them. Celeste barely slept that night. Her mind was racing, consumed by the weight of her discovery and the plan she was carefully crafting. The footage on her phone was damning, but it wasn't enough for her. She didn't just want to catch them, she wanted to make them feel the pain they had inflicted on her. Every ounce of love she had once felt for them had been poisoned, replaced by something darker, something that refused to be ignored. The next morning, she moved through the house with a forced sense of normalcy. She greeted Dominic as usual, poured herself a cup of coffee, and even exchanged casual conversation with Veronica. It sickened her, but she needed them to believe that she was still oblivious. She needed them to think they were safe. Throughout the day, she carefully planted seeds of doubt and paranoia. She left her phone on the counter with the screen lit up, as if she had just received a message. She made sure Dominic saw it but snatched it away before he could get a good look. She watched his expression shift as his mind filled in the blanks. Later, she lingered in the hallway near Veronica's room, pretending to be lost in thought, just long enough for her mother to notice. She wanted them to feel uneasy. She wanted them to wonder if she knew. Then, she took the next step. Celeste created an anonymous email account and sent Dominic a message that made her stomach twist with satisfaction. The subject line read, "I know what you did." The body of the message contained a single attachment, one of the videos she had taken of him and Veronica together, captured through the window. She didn't add any text, no threats, no accusations. Just the evidence of his betrayal, waiting for him to open. She sent a similar message to Veronica, making sure neither of them knew that the other had received it. Then she waited. The tension in the house shifted almost immediately. Dominic was quieter than usual, his eyes darting toward Celeste whenever he thought she wasn't looking. Veronica, normally composed and confident, fidgeted with her hands and avoided long conversations. Neither of them spoke about the emails, but Celeste could see the panic setting in. They were terrified. By the evening, she could barely contain her amusement as she watched them steal glances at each other, silently. questioning whether the other one had received the same message. Celeste didn't say a word. She wanted to enjoy watching them crumble. That night, she took things even further. While Dominic was in the shower, she snuck into his office and left her phone unlocked on his desk, displaying the recorded video in plain sight. Then she walked away, counting the seconds in her head before she heard the sound of his footsteps enter the room. A moment later, a sharp inhale echoed through the hallway. She smirked. He had seen it. She imagined the panic flooding through him, the way his hands must have trembled as he stared at the undeniable proof of his betrayal. She pictured him scrambling for an excuse, searching for a way out. But there was none. When he finally came to bed, he barely looked at her. He lay stiffly on his side, gripping the sheets as if they were the only thing keeping him grounded. Celeste stared at the ceiling, listening to his shallow breaths, knowing he was drowning in fear. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't need to. She had already won, but she wasn't finished yet. The final move in her game was coming, and when it did, neither Dominic nor Veronica would ever recover. Celeste woke up before the sun rose, her mind sharp and focused. The storm she had unleashed inside the house was growing stronger, and soon it would consume everything. Dominic and Veronica had spent the last day pretending everything was normal, but she could see through them. The way they avoided eye contact, the way their hands shook when they thought no one was looking, the restless energy that clung to them. It was all unraveling exactly as she wanted. Now, it was time for the final blow. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to make sure their secrets didn't just destroy them privately, but publicly. Quiet revenge wasn't enough. She wanted the world to see them for what they were. Celeste created a social media post using a fake account. She uploaded the video of Dominic and Veronica, adding just a few simple words. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. She didn't tag them. She didn't need to. The internet would do the work for her. Within minutes, the post began spreading. People were commenting, sharing, asking questions. The video was shocking enough to draw attention, and it wouldn't be long before their friends, family, and even co-workers saw it. Downstairs, she heard the first sound of panic, Veronica's phone buzzing uncontrollably. A second later, Dominic's followed. Then came the frantic footsteps, the hushed but urgent whispers as they tried to figure out what was happening. Celeste didn't move. She wanted them to experience every agonizing second of watching their world crumble. Minutes later, Dominic stormed into the bedroom, his face pale and glistening with sweat. He was gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. He opened his mouth to speak, but Celeste simply stared at him, waiting. Then came Veronica, her usually flawless composure shattered. Her hands trembled, her breath came in short gasps, and her expression was filled with unfiltered horror. The realization of what had happened hit them both at the same time. There was no hiding it now, no covering up their affair. The proof was out in the open for the entire world to see. Dominic's phone started ringing again, his boss, probably. Veronica's followed, likely friends or other family members who had stumbled upon the video. Their reputations, their carefully built lies. Everything was collapsing in real time. Celeste stood up slowly, savoring the moment. The pain they had caused her, the humiliation, the betrayal. It was nothing compared to what they were experiencing now. Veronica's voice cracked as she tried to plead, but Celeste ignored her. Dominic, always so full of confidence and control, looked lost for the first time. He took a step towards Celeste, as if expecting her to help him fix this. But there was nothing left to fix. Without a word, Celeste grabbed her packed suitcase from the closet. She had made sure everything was ready in advance. She wasn't going to stay here and watch them scramble for excuses. She wasn't interested in hearing their weak justifications or fake apologies. As she walked past them, she could hear their phones continuing to ring, the outside world closing in on them like vultures circling their prey. She didn't stop until she reached the front door. With one final glance over her shoulder, she saw the true price of their betrayal. Dominic and Veronica standing in the wreckage of their own making, their lives permanently stained by the truth she had exposed. Celeste stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. For the first time in months, she felt free.